Kyle woke up. He is famous. Kyle is host of the most popular talk show in recent memory, Stay Up Late with Kyle. Stay Up Late with Kyle has grown in popularity quickly in the last year, and the public has noticed. Inside has called Kyle a most excellent dumpy white man. Top Tech noted that Kyle is inspiring youth to explore STEM fields. Most other talk shows are dedicated to discussing Kyle and his personal details. Most online videos are best-of clips taken from Kyle's latest broadcast. The eye of the world is upon Kyle. Tonight is Kyle's most important guest interview yet. Stay Up Late with Kyle will be featuring Rachel May. She is a kind and lovely philanthropist. She is dear to the hearts of many. This interview requires preparation. Kyle cracked his eyes open, knowing today is his last chance to prepare for the interview. Kyle has 30 hours left. He must choose his actions wisely. Kyle decided to stay put and wither away. Kyle withered successfully and died. Kyle is now a ghost. This does not relieve him of his responsibilities. Kyle wrote down his first question. Kyle wrote down his second question. Kyle wrote down his third question. Kyle wrote down his last question. Kyle ripped his page of notes out of the notebook and got up from the desk. Kyle decided to take some time to choose the perfect outfit, knowing how important appearance is. Kyle chose the pasties made out of mashed skunk flesh. Getting the slimy garments to stay proved difficult, so Kyle opted to stick them to his body with hot glue. Kyle quickly crouched down on the floor, realizing his immediate need for... Kyle started to pick between the fuzz of his bedroom carpet, hoping to catch a stray beetle or two. Soon, he had a small handful of various insects, dead and alive. Kyle threw back his head and crammed the sticky, wriggling mass into his mouth. He felt refreshed. Kyle opened the fridge, intending to find something to eat. Kyle constructed a breakfast of poached eggs and toast, along with a small fruit cup and grilled sausage. Kyle ate his breakfast slowly and thoughtfully, enjoying every bite. He felt refreshed. Kyle approached his downstairs neighbor's door and knocked. Kyle hurried to the set. Per normal, he ceased to be a ghost before he arrived. Sitting across from his host chair was a glamorous woman with an air of genuinity. As Kyle approached her, Rachel looked up and smiled. "Good evening, Kyle," she said, looking him in the eyes. "I've been looking forward to being here." Kyle responded. Kyle stretched his arms wide, tilted his neck upwards, and was interrupted by his producer telling him and Rachel that it was time to start the show. Kyle shoved his producer out of the way, spread his arms wide, and began to scream loudly. He began to rotate slowly, screaming throughout, lightly brushing his hands against the faces of Rachel and his producer. After several minutes, Kyle was finished. He slowly put his hands to his sides and smiled. "I'm ready," said Kyle. Rachel blinked at Kyle, shrugged, and walked over to her seat. A moment after seating, the studio lights brightened and the cameras clicked on. "Good evening, everyone," said Kyle, looking at the camera. "Welcome back to Stay Up Late with Kyle." Kyle vomited all of the horrible things he had eaten earlier onto the floor. Rachel looked at Kyle, concerned, gave a couple coughs, and decided to play it cool and keep the show running. Kyle stopped, then vomited again, then continued with a shaky voice. Tonight, I have the pleasure of interviewing the lovely Rachel May, who needs no more introduction. Kyle motioned to Rachel, who smiled and waved at the camera. "Hello, Kyle," she said. "I'm glad to be here." "Well, I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss. So we might as well dive right in," said Kyle. "I'm very ready," said Rachel with a winning smile. Kyle produced the notes he had taken earlier. "Hey, Rachel, ever eaten a raw egg whole?" asked Kyle. Like shell and all?" asked Rachel. Kyle continued. "I have, like, a lot. It's really bad, though, so sometimes I spit it back up." There was a silence. "It actually gets easier the more you do it," continued Kyle without losing momentum. "So don't start, I say." Rachel chose not to answer and looked in another direction. Kyle asked another question. "You've been involved in a lot of different things," said Kyle, "but what's your funniest story?" "Well, that's a great question, Kyle," said. "I think the story I always remember. In the soup I made, I swapped out the water with milk and tipped the whole jar of salt in the pot. While my family was sick from trying to eat it, I swiped their things and locked myself in my room." Rachel laughed elegantly. Kyle decided to move on. Kyle asked another question. "So," said Kyle, "my mother is a mother. My mother's mother is her mother and my mother's mother. And many mothers have mother's mother's mother. Is your mother a mother?" Rachel went to answer and stopped. "I believe," she said eventually, "that I should answer yes?" Kyle asked another question. Rachel, "Are you guilty?" Kyle threw his questions on the floor, stood up, and pointed at her. Rachel's eye twitched slightly. "Guilty of what, dear Kyle?" She smiled disingenuously. "Guilty," spat Kyle, "of your crimes!" Rachel did not answer. Her eyelids both started twitching uncontrollably. After reading his final question, Kyle looked up from his paper. "Well, Rachel," he said, "I think that's all I was planning on asking you." "If that's the case, Kyle, may I ask you something in return?" asked Rachel, smiling one more time. "What on earth are you wearing? Are they made of skunks?" Before Kyle could answer, the camera shut down. The broadcast was over. Kyle returned home knowing the interview had gone well. But as he lay in bed and drifted to sleep, he felt that perhaps something was still missing.